What was it like when you were a child? Was your family close? Think back to when you were 5 or 9 or 12. Maybe you were the only child. Maybe you were the oldest of 6 or the youngest of 2. Picture your normal life. Who got you up in the mornings? Got you ready for school? Who made you breakfast? Who took you to school? Or did you walk? Who picked you up? After you got home, who helped you with all that homework? Did you sit down at the dinner table as a family and share a meal together? Who roughhoused with you? Who played games with you? Who took you to the ballpark or fishing? Who taught you how to sew or how to cook? What do you know to be normal? Now think for a moment how close you are to your parents. Some of us grew up as mama's little boy or daddy's little girl, or maybe you were one of many children and you had a loving relationship with your parents. That bond is what I really want you to focus on. I want you to feel the draw towards each other. I want you to feel the love that fills your heart, the way you think the world of them. Are you feeling that right now? Do you have that connection, even as we speak? Keep thinking about that connection, its power, its energy that you have between each other. Now, picture a rope or a string, something that represents this connection between the two of you, something that's visible. This is your visual bond that you have with your parents. It's special. It's unlike any other connection you have with anybody else in the world. It is the most powerful connection. Now that you have felt this and you're visualizing it right now, and you are connected to your parents, feel how your heart is filled with love for them. And I'm going to ask you to do something else. Right now, I want you to break that bond. I want you to cut it in half. Or imagine that your parent just disappeared into thin air. And before you think, no, I don't want to think that, I'm going to keep my connection. What if someone else came in and ripped that parent away from you, or ripped you away from that parent? Are you confused? Are you mad at me for making you do this exercise? I want you to think about the severed connection. Exactly how do you feel right now in this moment? Can you even imagine being torn away from your parent like that? Doesn't it hurt to think about it? Would it surprise you that this is happening all the time? Would it surprise you that our court systems aids in the events that lead to this? This is going on in our families right now. Hi, I am Dawn Andrea McCarty, and I am an adult survivor of the event that I just walked you through. I am speaking to you today as the voice for millions of children around the world that have suffered with the fallout from the court's malpractice of the best interests of the child. Today, I am the chair of the National Parents Organization of Florida, and I am speaking to you about a crisis in our country and many other countries around the world. This isn't just an American crisis. This is a global crisis. And the children are the ones that have to live with this mysterious trauma that they feel, but they do not know why. We should not have to discuss that a child needs both parents. Yet for some reason, millions of children are kept away from theirs. This isn't a dependency issue. This is a family courts issue. And the lack of enforcing their own court orders and the lack of protecting the child's inalienable right to have equal access to both parents after they've divorced. The child didn't get a divorce. Most of these parents are fit and loving parents. Look around you, look to your neighbor, look to your right, look to your left. These are our school teachers, our nurses, our counselors, our law enforcement officers, our military personnel. Many of these are people that we are out engaging with on a daily basis. These are average people, like most of us in this room. Some are entrusted with other people's children, but they are not allowed to see their own. Right now, we are all on a stay-at-home order, while we have many people that are not at home. They are out there serving on the front line of the coronavirus or protecting our country. Parents are not always available, but when they are, what matters is that they are there and the children have quality time with them. Think about all of the videos that we have seen online or on the news about a returning soldier that surprises his child at school. You can see the love and the excitement and how they go from pure joy to a puddle of emotional tears. That is the bond that we are asking them to break. Does that make any sense? Some parents serving in the military lose access to their children because they chose to be in the military. They chose to be kept away. Let me be very clear. Serving our country or working on the front line of the coronavirus does not disqualify you from being a parent. The child's bond with their parent far surpasses any man-made decision when they are not a risk. Many leaders, such as judges, our lawyers, or even the media, have all become deaf to the voices of parents. They say they're too emotional to deal with. So let me ask you, are you a good person? Are you a perfect parent? Many of you are fit and loving parents that participate. Isn't that what most of us are? So if you are not a threat to your child, yet someone took them from you and kept you from ever seeing them again, would you be all right with that? Or would you panic and do everything you could to fight the system to get your child back? I bet you would. When this happens to any one of us, there is a primal fear that could set in, that makes us defenseless to a simulation or makes us aggressive towards anyone that threatens us. including our children, or to whom we blame for the wrongs. I wonder if most of us realize that children also experience primal fear. Like myself, we do what we need to do to survive. I survived what I call my straight A's. My first A was abandonment, where my mother left me with my father for almost 2 years. My second A was abduction, where 2 years later she appeared out of the blue and ripped me away from my father. I never saw him again for 44 years. And my third A is adoption, where she replaced my father with her new husband. I have many more A's, but that's what I'm going to talk about right now with those. But what is unacceptable is that we need to have this conversation, because most of us can agree that when children receive more love, they thrive. It is common sense. It is nature. When children receive more love, they thrive. The more love we give them, the more they feel safe, secure, and grow up to be stable and confident adults and become loving parents themselves. When children have both of their parents, they do better. Ginger Gentile is a former executive director of National Parents Organization, or NPO, and she said, "It is a shame that we still have to debate this. And it is a shame that our politicians are not taking action to ensure that both parents have equal access to their children after divorce, separation, or in the case of never married parents." Right now, according to a bulletin published by the APA, in North America, over 25 million parents are erased from their children's lives after divorce. This number is constantly growing. So what does 25 million people look like? For example, it would be just shy of the entire population of Texas at 29 million. Or it's slightly more than the third most populated state of Florida at 21 million. Or the entire continent of Australia at 25 million. For sport fans, the Michigan Stadium holds 100,000 fans. It would take 250 stadiums to accommodate 25 million people from a state that only has 10 million people in total. So let's think about this a little bit more. What if we were to count the children? According to agencies like childtrends.org or the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, children who suffer from ACEs may tend to get into more trouble at school. They may get into fights, or maybe they'll shut down altogether. We lose our voice when we cannot speak our minds. When this happens, we may fall behind. Our grades may start to drop, and we become the problem child, which I was known as. I've answered the questions on the ACEs studies myself as if I was the child I was growing up, and I scored at least a 5. The test I took asked me, before your 18th birthday, was a biological parent ever lost through divorce, abandonment, or another reason? This to me, I can actually separate into 2 points, because I did lose a parent through divorce or separation, and I did lose a parent because she abandoned me. So they kind of crisscross. So that's why I said at least a 5. Prior to these studies, though, schools didn't know what to do with the misbehaved kids. So oftentimes we were put in timeout or on detention, and sometimes we were suspended. So if we are not in school, we're not learning. And most importantly, we're not learning how to cope with the effects, and then we are further traumatized. Today, everywhere we look, we're all talking about the ACEs studies and how they help us to identify the events the child may have experienced to get to the root cause of their behavior. While this is great, it's a great improvement in helping children learn to cope with trauma, it does not help to prevent it in the first place. It seems until recently that we are just trying to catch up by treating symptoms. However, that does not prevent these experiences from happening in the first place. Children have been experiencing symptoms that have been superficially treated, but the underlying problem has not been addressed. For example, maybe someone has bad eating habits and they go to the doctor because they don't feel good. And the doctor says, well, you're obese. So he prescribes either medication or tells them get more exercise, change their eating habits. What have we done as a society in our country to curb obesity? We educated the public on what causes it. We have all kinds of TV shows, from talk to reality. Turn on Netflix and check out all these shows and documentaries on the subject. With this health awareness movement, many of us are more aware of what we eat. We have a plethora of weight management options at our fingertips. We have gyms going up everywhere. We have experts. We have personal coaches. We have websites and blogs. There are apps to help you count your calories and your carbs. We have Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and other platforms where someone is always trying to sell us the latest and greatest idea or tip. The propaganda list is a mile long. Then we take it even further, and we list all of the ingredients on all of our food packaging and some menus. It includes how many calories or carbs, fats, or sugars that are included in that item. The purpose is so that the consumer can choose a healthier lifestyle. My body kept the score. I suffered from colitis and digestive issues. My thyroid tanked, and I packed on the weight like nobody's business. I was ashamed and embarrassed about it. And that affected every other aspect of my life as well. I felt like I wasn't good enough again. I want to put a spin on this and have you think about my silenced voice that I lost as a child showed up in hypothyroidism. And my irrelevant gut instinct showed up as colitis. What I really want you to think about is that I reversed my colitis by making lifestyle changes and working on my own self-improvement and awareness. I am healthier today than I was 10 years ago. I couldn't climb a flight of stairs without triggering an asthma attack or feeling like my heart was pumping so hard it was going to burst out of my chest. I want to ask you another question when it comes to trauma. How do you think children cope? There are several ways. One could be maybe they overeat and they add obesity to the long list of potential health issues. They may turn to the wrong types of friends just to feel like they fit in. When I turned to the wrong types of friends, I finally felt like I fit in, because my new friends didn't judge me, because they didn't want to be judged either. For some of us, in order to feel like we fit in, we may start to do things such as smoking, just to calm our nerves, or to be cool for a change. Some may go beyond that and turn to drugs and alcohol. I felt popular among this crowd. The best high in the world that I ever felt was being accepted just for being me. I wasn't allowed to go very many places as a young teen, but in my late teens, I had a Ford Mustang GT, and I knew how to drive it. I had a souped up gear ratio in the rear, and I would drive it so fast that I buried the tack. The tachometer is what that means, just for those that may not know what the tack is. I was traveling at the speed of over 140 miles per hour. I don't know how fast I was going because the needle would not go any further. I did this every day, to and from work. It was exhilarating, and I didn't care how dangerous it was. After taking risks, what happens next? Some may feel that the pain or pressure is too much to deal with, so they self-harm, or worse, commit suicide. I considered it in high school, the pressure of all the trauma and not fitting in. I remember standing at my kitchen counter, staring at a knife. As I stared at it, I zoned out. It's the best way I can describe it. To the point that I wasn't really there. It's like standing in a daze. And it seemed like such a long period of time that I was just in this dark space. And when I got the message that said, "You will be needed," that's when I snapped out of it. That's it. That's all it was. Just 4 little ambiguous words. A few years later, when I was driving 140 plus miles per hour from Escalon, California to Stockton, California, long country roads, there's no stop signs, no stop lights, few railroad crossings. I wondered how easy it would be if I just drove towards that tree or into that oncoming train that I was racing to the railroad crossing. The same thought would pop into my mind, that if I did this, I wouldn't be where I was needed later. I believe that place is right here. Here are some hard facts regarding youth suicide. This is from the CDC. Suicide is the second leading cause of death between the ages of 10 and 24 years old. More teenagers and young adults die from suicide than from cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, influenza, chronic lung disease, all combined. Every day in our nation, there are an average of 3,069 attempts by young people in grades 9 through 12. And if you add 7th and 8th graders to that, the numbers would definitely be higher. 4 out of 5 teens who attempted suicide gave clear warning signs. I think it is safe to say that I gave clear warning signs. Children do not commit suicide because they are physically or sexually abused, not solely. They commit suicide from the perpetual pain of the emotional trauma that was caused by the abuse. For me, the physical pain had long since dissipated. But what was left was the emotional pain that I couldn't resolve. It is time that we start addressing this invisible pain and call it what it is: child abuse. So let's talk about the child's path to becoming an adult. What do you think our world looks like when we grow up? In a high conflict or contentious divorce? Who do we become when we reach the age of 18? That is the big picture. I think many are failing to see this when they're making decisions that affect the child's entire life, not just their childhood. What goes on today in our court systems and in divorces affects them far into the future. I still work through these effects decades later. On a child's 18th birthday, does something magically come in and erase all of their pain? Now that we're adults, will it just automatically be okay? I ask this because I hear judges and experts tell parents not to worry because their children will turn out okay, that their children are resilient, that they'll bounce back. Wait until they're 18. They'll come back to you. Just stick it out. They'll know what to do. Many of us have heard an attorney or somebody in a courtroom comment on how it might be too hard for the child to have to take an hour car trip to visit their other parent. That is a gross example of stripping the right of a child to have continued access to their parent. Are these attorneys or whoever they are people practicing psychology from the courtroom? I sure hope not. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but where were the adult survivors or the experts to validate those myths? Because I didn't hear anybody in that courtroom counter that. I, for one, think that is a mistake. If I were there, I would have said that these are myths, to believe that their reasoning could actually be in the best interest of the child. The attorneys and judges are not the ones that have to look into the child's eyes and tell them that they only get to keep one parent. This isn't a favorite book or a car or a home. This is a child, the parent's flesh and blood. What's even worse is that there are children being told that they need to wait until they're 18. And then you can go and look for your parent if you want. Or wait until you're an adult and you can make up your own mind. You can find out for yourself. I was told I can do whatever I want when I'm an adult, which to me translated into you do not have a choice or a voice until you're an adult. What is reprehensible is that these are myths. Does anyone actually believe these myths, or are they completely oblivious to the damage that they are doing to an entire family? Our courts cannot carve out a parent because the other parent no longer likes them. Are we in a court of law or a classroom? What this is called is the obstruction of the family bond. These comments are shallow, and to my knowledge, they are not based on any evidence or studies conducted where the outcome of these children were not affected in any way. If these myths were true, then one of the questions on the ACEs study would not include the question if a child suffered a loss of a parent due to separation or divorce and not death. Here is a fact. When two parents get a divorce, they do not divorce their child. Fact. Look at a marriage license. The children are not listed on it. But look at a child's birth certificate. There is a space for a mother and a father. Here's another fact. It does not take a marriage license to become a parent. The right to a biological parent belongs to the child, not the state, and not the one parent. I grew up always wondering who I looked like. Where did I come from? Did I have any grandparents or siblings? I longed for family that would love me no matter what. So many curiosities goes through a child's mind, but we're never allowed to talk about it or ask questions. You know what makes me my father's child? DNA. And here you can see just how much of him is in me. A child has human rights. According to the Florida Bar, the court's purpose is not to save a marriage, but to help divorcing spouses reach a solution and arrive at agreeable terms for handling the breakup of their marriage. I have a hard time comprehending how erasing a parent is reaching a solution and arriving at agreeable terms. According to the Convention of Rights of the Child, it says that a child's right includes the right to association with both parents. It was my right to have a relationship with my father. It was not her right to end the relation simply because she married someone else and she wanted to replace my dad for her new husband instead. And in Article 7, it says, the child shall be registered immediately after birth, shall have a right to a birth name and a nationality, and, as far as possible, the right to know and be cared for by his or her parents. Notice that parents is plural, and there's no stipulation that says only if married. It shouldn't matter if our parents were married or not. What matters more is that we have access to both parents that want nothing more than to be a parent to their child and everything that comes with that. Why should violating the child's rights and the emotional trauma they endure be considered child abuse? The emotional abuse is carried throughout our lifetimes if it's never addressed. We don't know we need access to mental health. We don't know that we're suffering from emotional trauma. We just carry it with us. We feel that pain every single day. And where the physical pain fades away, the emotional trauma continues on. Due to that emotional pain, we are triggered by events that are all based on our experiences. Those that come from that physical or sexual abuse and some of the emotional and psychological abuse. I was violently assaulted on several occasions by my stepsister, who abused me for an 8-year period. She strangled me, but I do not remember the pain as much as I remember the fear. I remember that fear, and I can still see her demon eyes looking at me as the light was fading and my focus was closing in. What does separation or divorce feel like to a child? To me, it felt like my dad died. He was just gone. And the longer time went, the more I longed for him. For a child, it feels like they died because the pain is so severe when they just disappear. This is a living bereavement. I grieved for my father for as long as I can remember. I finally found him in 2016, and I have to grieve him again because he passed away in 2018. So I grieved him twice in one lifetime. If the parent is still around, but the child never gets to see them, they may feel rejection. Too often, the targeting parent allows a child to believe that their other parent just does not love them enough to make the effort. They block communications, they block phone calls, texts, they hide letters, cards, gifts. When the child feels a break in their connection, that is equivalent to a rejection. If they believe that their parent does not care about them enough to bother, their trust system starts to weaken, and the breakdown of that bond begins. In reality, unbeknownst to the child, the parent may go to jail if they attempt to see them. Children cannot comprehend any of this. It is far too confusing for even the adults to wrap their heads around, let alone a child. And they often internalize this pain. When a child constantly hears derogatory comments from one parent regarding the other, to them it instills fear, uncertainty. When one parent seems to express how much they hate the other parent, to the child, another internalization, it feels like that parent must hate that half of them as well. I used to wonder why my mom went through all of the trouble to abduct me the way she did, if she just hated that part of me. If she didn't want me around, why did she bother to steal me away from the one person that wanted me? To a child, this is very traumatic. The less they understand, the more traumatic it is. Their heart is wounded. The pain from this adverse childhood experience is real, and it is called emotional trauma. The long-term effects from those experiences. This is what is being displayed in children and their behaviors at schools and at home. So back to the ACEs studies that I mentioned, one of the questions was if a child had lost a parent due to separation or divorce, but not death. So why does this study ask this question? Why does it ask if a child lost a parent due to divorce and separation and not death? It is because it is a traumatic event, and this study proves it. When a child loses a living parent, they do not know how to cope. They do not know how to cope with the pain, with the anger, the rejection, or the fear. So why are there nowhere near the amount of resources for these children or adult survivors that will help them to understand and deal with this debilitating long-term effect of their childhood trauma? This trauma has led them to depression, anxiety, the mental health issues, some health issues, shorter life expectancies, transgenerational transference, which means that as we grow up, we may repeat what we were taught. Or worse, suicide. Why do we not see as many Netflix shows or movies on this topic? Why is the media not talking about this? Why do we not see propaganda that says if you prevent a child from seeing their other parent forcibly, they may suffer from depression or anxiety or these other ailments as well? Why are there no mental health gyms, no TV shows, talk shows that discuss this broken attachment, the emotional cutoff, the ACEs of the trauma of losing a parent to divorce or separation? Why do we not address emotional abuse or the legalized parental childhood abductions? leading to other forms of childhood trauma and those long-term effects. Why are we not educating parents how to deal with their own trauma from their marriage, or possibly even from their own childhood? My mother has suffered a severe childhood emotional trauma herself. Had she gotten the help she needed, maybe I wouldn't have suffered the way I did. Maybe my stepsister would have gotten the help she needed. Maybe her and I could have had a happier childhood. And just maybe we would have bonded as sisters. Why do we keep repeating these same cycles over and over again and allowing this to force our children to deal with the aftermath in their future? The one that they're supposed to be well-rounded adults? I'll tell you why. It's because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry to keep parents fighting in court. Think about this. Not only do you need lawyers, you'll need counselors, mediators, guardian ad litems. You might need a real estate agent to sell your marital home. You'll need a property manager because you'll be renting. You may need to hire movers or moving equipment. You'll need 2 households full of furniture, kitchen items, bathroom items, and your children now need 2 bedrooms. The big money, though, is in the courts and the attorneys that are hired. Without parents at each other's throats, family law attorneys would not make as much money. Not all family law attorneys, but enough that it forces this to continue to happen over and over. Our court system is so jam-packed that there is no time for judges to see what is really happening. Once the case leaves their court, they do not follow up on it to make sure that everyone is okay. They do not have the time because there are so many cases for them to get to. Most of these cases do not need to be in family court because divorce should not be a catastrophic event that it has become. When 2 parents decide to divorce, they need to figure out still how to co-parent. They do not need a judge to tell them how to do this. They can divide their assets and realize that it is far better for them and their family if they do not spend the money to fight it out in court, but to save that money and use it to supply 2 bedrooms for their children who would not feel like a visitor in one of them. They can use this money to make sure costs are covered, to pay for childcare, braces, healthcare, clothing, sports equipment, or maybe send them to college. Most divorced parents cannot afford to put their children into sports because the equipment or the uniforms cost so much money. They simply cannot afford it. So instead of fighting it out in court, invest in the child. Most parents know what's good for their children, and I believe that parents can live apart and still be great parents. Parents can remarry or have new partners and still co-parent. They can still work together to raise their child in a happy and healthy environment. So let's remove the conflict from the courtroom and the winner takes all scenario so that they can move on and provide that best possible life for their child. Their child will learn that it is okay to not agree, that fighting can be dealt with, that they can work through it, that they can learn how to deal with conflict by the example of their parents who show them. That is how we're going to break this cycle, by teaching their children how to deal with conflict in a healthier way. Let's put biological fathers' names on every birth certificate and allow for paternity tests to verify who is or who is not a father. This can be done rather easily. Our system does not care if you're a biological father or not. They will take any father to collect child support. Just because a parent has never married does not give license to a mother to be the sole parent of that child. The child has a right to both of their parents. The winner takes all And the concept of who is the better parent in our court system is cancer to our families. I never want to hear who is the better parent used in a scale to sever a child from their family, from their parent. The best parent isn't the parent's right. It is the child's right to both parents. So the best parent is always going to be both parents. When one parent rules over the child's access, it is out of convenience for that parent. That is not what's in the best interest of the child. The presumption should always be equal shared parenting in both legal and in access. Right now, the system promotes the winner-takes-all scenario, and the way I see it, the child loses every time, no matter who wins. Parents get divorces. Children do not divorce their parent. They should not be the ones at a loss. How do we get there? As a member of the executive committee of the National Parents Organization, we want effective state statutes in every state. We want to ensure that there is a rebuttable presumption of equal shared parenting with as close to 50-50 timeshare as possible. Both parents need to show up and be 100% parent to give 100% of themselves for the good of their child. Both parents need to allow that from the other parent. If we have a system that allows one parent to forcibly remove the other, that is an epic failure. The love for that parent does not dissolve like some of these experts believe. The reality is that for the child, the pain is overwhelming. They are not emotionally mature enough to comprehend what is happening. They do not know what to do. They do not know what to do. So they act out. Their behavior changes, and they are in crisis. For the parents, we need to ensure that they too have access to healing their trauma in order for it to not become a transgenerational problem. They need access to mental health themselves. We need to remove the stigma that mental health is a bad thing. Everybody can use mental health to be mentally healthy, confident, secure in themselves. They need to collaborate during their dissolution of marriage and do everything they can to ensure that both parents have adequate time with their child. They need to communicate or relearn how to. Removing the conflict from the courts will help make this possible for the majority of cases. We need mental health experts to understand the emotional cutoff and how to recognize it in the potential parent that is capable of trying to cut out the other one. Maybe we need pre-divorce courses or revamp the ones that already exist that teaches parents how to co-parent, how to communicate post-divorce, how to not be at each other's throats. Do all of this before they can be granted their final dissolution of marriage so everything is resolved by the time the judge signs the order. They must realize that what they have in common is the love they have for their child. It is all about protecting and shielding the child. And it's not just the parent's job. It is also the court's job to understand that that's what we need. We must stop these traumatic events before we end up with an entire generation of dysfunctional adults who cannot maintain relationships and they cannot parent their own children. Today, we have more and more adult survivors coming forward and speaking out. I speak to them from all over the world. One thing that I have noticed is that we all have remarkable similar events. Our stories might be a little different, but our events are almost identical. We are waking up to what has happened to us. And I am here to tell you that we know that we have been let down by a parent and many of our leaders, our lawmakers, our child welfare agencies, and our mental health experts. We realize more and more the devastating issues of this invisible abuse and that it is destroying the lives of children around the world. When we stop ignoring the fact that this emotional abuse is bad, if not worse than physical abuse, because that pain is carried throughout the lives of those who have suffered, then we can finally start helping people, helping these children. It cannot go ignored any longer. It may be considered psychological maltreatment, and if so, it must be addressed and stopped. This issue will not be solved just by research or academic journals and theories. It is going to be solved by all of us working together, including the adult survivors, to find solutions and resources. Where do we start? We get the children the support that they need and access to both of their biological parents that have not been removed due to a physical abuse or sexual abuse or neglect. We need to remove divorce from the courtroom because the courts have no business removing or separating families that are not at risk of abuse and neglect. If there is a criminal accusation, that needs to be moved to a criminal court where people can face their accusers, they can have a jury of their peers, and they can potentially defend themselves. For the cases that do go through family courts, we need family court judges to be inclined to enforce the orders that they've issued so that law enforcement can start enforcing laws. And we need to tell family courts around the world who are obstructing the family bond to cease and desist and to finally stop erasing our families. Thank you very much.